Good afternoon all. Today I would like to discuss a topic from your paper named Cultural Studies and Introduction. In this paper you have to study 12 essays. As you know, this is an extension of the paper you have studied in the second semester, Literary Criticism and Theory. As an introductory remark on cultural studies, I would like to talk about background of cultural studies. As you can see on the screen, cultural studies is a study of how society creates and shares meaning. As you know, during 1960s and 50s, the focus of literary theory and criticism has shifted from literariness to cultural elements. We have to discuss here what is culture, what is the element of culture, and how cultural studies is different from literary studies. In 1960s and 50s, as I said earlier, media studies and media theories focused on the concept of culture. They have taken culture into a new dimension. Culture has multiple perspectives. Culture has become a point of discussion. As we have seen in literary theories, language was the focus. Linguistic elements, structuralism, post-structuralism, modernity, postmodernity, and other allied areas have been discussed in detail in literary theories. In cultural studies, culture has become the focal point. As you know, European social theories on media and culture was the beginning of cultural studies, and neo-Marxist theories, especially Frankfurt School. We have to mention two names of two theoreticians from Frankfurt School, Horkheimer and Adorno, and neo-Marxism. Most British cultural studies theories can be labeled as neo-Marxist. The importance which the neo-Marxists attach to the superstructure has created a fundamental division within Marxism. They assure that change can surely begin with peaceful ideological reform rather than by violent revolution as traditional Marxists put forward. This is the great or sea change in the concept of late Marxism or neo-Marxism. Neo-Marxism actually leads to the inauguration of another branch of knowledge, that is cultural studies. You can see here the concept, reality is a social construction. Society creates the meaning of things in our environment because these meanings are constructed. They are a perception of reality, not reality itself. To understand a culture, we must understand how they define reality. I would like to show you a brief video by Ron Strickland, what he says about cultural studies, how the genre cultural studies was inaugurated. Let me seek your attention to the video, please.
Hello, I'm Ron Strickland. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm providing some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literary and cultural studies. In this installment, I'll provide some background on British cultural studies in the 1970s and 80s. I'll discuss some of the conditions that led to the establishment of the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies at Birmingham. I'll discuss the work of key members of the Birmingham group and the influence of Birmingham School of Cultural Studies on cultural studies scholarship around the globe. The Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies was founded in 1964 with Richard Hoggart as its first head. The center was established to provide institutional structure for the study of culture much more broadly defined than traditional culture. There is a tradition in Britain, going back at least to the publication of Matthew Arnold's Culture and Anarchy in 1869, of recognizing the importance of culture for maintaining political order in modern society. In the first part of the 20th century, this conservative cultural political project was carried on by formalist and aestheticist literary critics. F.R. Leavis promoted the teaching and the study of canonical literature through his journal Scrutiny, in books like The Great Tradition, and in his teaching at Cambridge. But by the late 1950s, people like Richard Hoggart in his book The Uses of Literacy, and Raymond Williams in his book Culture and Society, were recognizing the limitation of analysis of canonical literary texts for addressing the complexity of.
In the beginning of the lecture, you have seen how cultural studies as a discipline was inaugurated. We can see the key strength and limitation of British cultural theories is their direct involvement in various radical social movements. And as he mentioned here, from cultural materialism and Levian thoughts of culture, and also he mentioned British Birmingham School of Cultural Studies. The first important school of cultural studies theories was formed at the University of Birmingham during 1960s by Stuart Hall. You have to study in your syllabus two essays of Stuart Hall. One is culturalist and structuralist paradigm, and other essay he is talking about paradigm shifts of culture. Actually, he argued that mass media can be best understood as a pluralistic public fortune or public way, and the idea that media may prove to be a place where the power of dominant cities or dominant elites can be easily challenged. The question of dominance, power, cultural studies also asking, probing the issue of haves and have-nots, mega or high culture and low culture. We can conclude the essay.
Modern British culture. In books like Culture and Society and in The Long Revolution, published in 1961, Raymond Williams articulated a theory of culture that differed sharply from the dominant theory of culture then prevailing in British and American literary studies. Leavism in Great Britain and the New Criticism in the United States promoted an understanding of literature as the product of rare genius that transcends the particularities of local historical moments. For Leavis and for the new critics, great literature and great art defined their national cultures. But this meant an understanding of culture limited to the canonical tradition and detached from everyday life. By contrast, Williams was interested in defining a national culture that changed over history and a definition of culture in which there is not a clear line of demarcation between the canonical tradition of high culture and.
Yes, he stops high culture and low culture. I would like to mention what is the need of a study or need of cultural studies. These studies or cultural studies focus on the use of media to create various forms of culture which structure everyday human life. It was, I said earlier, inaugurated by the University of Birmingham Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies, which develop a variety of critical methods for analysis, interpretation, and criticism of cultural artifacts. What is the need of cultural studies? Here we have to say it provides tools which enable one to read and interpret one's culture critically. Critical analysis of one's own culture. It subverts cultural studies subverts the distinction between, as he mentioned, the high and low culture. You have to study, let's say, an ordinary culture by Raymond Williams. We will discuss high culture and low culture in detail in that essay. I would like to emphasize here one point about cultural studies which allows critical scrutiny of culture without prior prejudices towards one or another sort of cultural text. We should not be prejudiced. This is bad culture, this is high culture. We cannot say even in art, in the form of arts also. How can you say Kathakali is part of high culture and Kolkali is part of low culture? We have to discuss in detail and look at things objectively. If Kolkali is part of a cultural artifact or cultural expression, we have to see in the same way the importance of Kathakali also. In that way, we have to critically analyze each element, every works of human life. It includes sartorial culture, food culture, lifestyle, music, songs, dance, performance, drama, everything we have to analyze under the scrutiny, under the title of cultural studies. It asserts value of popular culture, empowers minority and values of their culture, not majority's culture alone. When you say Indian culture, when you say Malayali culture, you have to say which Malayali. You have to define Malayali culture. In that way, in detail, we have to go deep and deep about cultural elements. Cultural studies gives you space for minorities and majorities, marginalized literature. So in short, it's a comprehensive idea of human life. It gives you an opportunity to critically analyze human life and culture. We started from Matthew Arnold's concept of culture and anarchy. Now we are discussing culture from different point of view. Culture is not one's own property. It should define from multiple perspectives. It lends itself to a multiculturalist program. There should be a space for multiculturalist views, and it makes people sensitized towards relationship of power and domination as encoded in cultural text. In an essay, Stuart Hall's essay, Encoding and Decoding, we will see how this coded culture is fabricated. He illustrates the idea of encoding and decoding in that essay. We will discuss it in detail in next class. Cultural studies, in fine, shows how much media culture manipulates and enriches us, thus empowering individual to resist the dominant meaning. To conclude, I would like to conclude with a quote from the essay. Cultural studies contains three fields of project of analyzing. One, production and political economy of culture. Second one, cultural text analysis. Third one, audience reception of text and their efforts. We will discuss all these elements in the next class. Thank you all. Please read the essays mentioned, additional essays mentioned in your syllabus. Thank you all. Thank you very much.